That Tuesday afternoon, the hearing room of the House Judiciary Committee was absolutely packed. Every seat was taken by reporters, staffers, and onlookers who all felt something historic was coming. At the witness table sat Stephen Miller, once Donald Trump's senior advisor and the main designer behind some of the administration's harshest immigration policies, jaw tight, eyes scanning the room like a hunter sizing up territory. Right in front of him, Texas Representative Jasmine Crockett adjusted her microphone. She looked calm and poised, but unmistakable determination burned across her face. Over the next 30 minutes, Miller would interrupt her 6 separate times, each one sharper and more forceful than the last. Yet it was Crockett's 7th statement, delivered with quiet, surgical precision, that finally silenced him and flipped the entire mood of the hearing. Within moments, the exchange was blowing up online, pulling in millions of views and sparking a nationwide conversation about respect, power, and who actually gets to control the story in Washington. Before we dive into this unforgettable clash that stopped the country in its tracks, smash that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss our deep dives into the moments that define politics. Drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. We love hearing from people across the country who still believe in truth and accountability. To really understand why this moment exploded the way it did, you have to know the two players and why their showdown felt inevitable the instant Miller took his seat. By 38, Stephen Miller had built his entire career as the unflinching face of hardline immigration enforcement. As Trump's senior advisor and chief speechwriter, he was the driving force behind some of the most polarizing policies of the era: family separation at the border, the travel ban on Muslim-majority countries, and others. In D.C., people knew him for his combative style and machine gun debate tactics. He almost never lost his cool, whether it was senators, journalists, or critics. He spoke fast, dominated the floor, and never gave an inch. Across from him sat 42-year-old Texas freshman Representative Jasmine Crockett, already known as one of Congress's sharpest and most fearless questioners. A former civil rights attorney and public defender, she knew exactly how to handle hostile witnesses. From both lived experience and the community she represented, she understood what it felt like to have to fight twice as hard just to get a word in. Her district covered parts of Dallas and its suburbs, places directly wounded by the very policies Miller had shaped. The stakes that day were sky high. The committee was examining the long-term damage from Trump-era immigration enforcement, especially the family separation policy that tore thousands of children from their parents at the border. Newly released documents proved officials had been explicitly warned about the devastating psychological harm, yet they went ahead anyway. Miller was there to answer for his direct role in creating and carrying out those orders. For him, it was an opportunity to defend his record and claim the policies were still essential for national security. He showed up loaded with statistics, polished sound bites, and his trademark aggressive confidence, ready to sell his actions as tough but necessary. For Crockett, the issue was personal. She had toured detention centers, spoken to separated families, and witnessed the trauma firsthand. As a black woman in Congress, she also recognized a pattern she'd lived her whole life: being talked over, cut off, or brushed aside by men who treated power like a club. She had spent her career dealing with men exactly like Miller, men who mistook loudness for logic and interruption for intellect. The tension in the room was electric. Behind Miller sat his lawyers and advisors in dark suits. Behind Crockett sat her staff and immigration advocates, some wearing T-shirts printed with pictures of children ripped from their parents. Major networks cut into regular programming to air the hearing live, cameras catching every twitch and glare. At exactly 2 p.m., Chairman Jim Jordan banged the gavel to start. Keeping order would prove almost impossible with the gallery overflowing, but everyone was glued to their seats. Democrats were ready to hammer Miller on his record. Republicans were prepared to shield him and shift focus to the current border. But every single person there knew the real fireworks would start when Crockett got her 5 minutes. For the first 20 minutes, the pressure just kept rising. Democrat after Democrat pressed Miller. He brushed each one aside the same way, dodging, talking over them, leaning on rehearsed lines. Republican members tossed him easy questions that let him paint himself as a misunderstood hero. Nobody had put a dent in him. Then Chairman Jordan announced, "The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, for 5 minutes." You could have heard a pin drop. Cameras zoomed in tight. Crockett leaned toward her mic, voice steady and strong. Mr. Miller, thank you for being here today. I'll begin with a simple question. Do you acknowledge that the family separation policy caused documented, lasting psychological harm to thousands of children? Miller shot back instantly, words sharp and fast. Congresswoman, what I acknowledge is that the policy was essential for border security. Mr. Miller, Crockett tried to pull him back. He plowed right over her. The real trauma comes from human traffickers and from prior administrations that encouraged illegal migration. She raised her voice just enough, still perfectly composed. Mr. Miller, I'm asking about the specific, documented harm. He interrupted again, louder. The sources you're relying on are biased and leave out the full picture. Mr. Miller, she said firmly, this is my time. He kept going. The border crisis didn't start with us. President Trump and I were the ones trying to solve it. Murmurs rippled through the gallery. Chairman Jordan gave a half-hearted gavel tap. The witness will let the member ask her questions. Miller leaned back slightly, jaw clenched, staring her down. Crockett turned a page, completely unfazed, as if the interruptions were just static. Mr. Miller, I have here a memo from your own Department of Health and Human Services that says, direct quote, significant and lasting psychological damage to children. This is your administration's own finding. Do you dispute it? Miller launched into another deflection. What I dispute is the idea we didn't care about children. That same memo also. She tried to push forward, he just talked louder. The Obama administration built the cages. They separated families too. The gallery started getting restless. Even some Republicans looked uneasy at his tone. Crockett took notes while he ranted. When he finally paused, she jumped in fast. Mr. Miller, I understand you have talking points, but these are documents from your own administration. He nearly yelled, my administration saved lives. We stopped child trafficking that you people refuse to acknowledge. Crockett looked to the chair. Mr. Chairman, will the witness be directed to let me ask my questions? Jordan tapped the gavel weakly again. Mr. Miller, please. Miller sat back, face red, knuckles white gripping the table. Crockett met his stare, voice like steel. Mr. Miller, I've been a civil rights lawyer and public defender across this country, and I have never. He smirked and cut in again. Your courtroom experience doesn't make you an expert on national security. This time she didn't talk over him or look to the chair. She simply crossed her arms, leaned back, and waited. Miller ranted for almost 30 seconds, border policy, trafficking, democratic hypocrisy, his voice bouncing off the walls. When he finally stopped, waiting for her counterattack, Crockett let the silence stretch. 1 beat. 2 beats. The whole room leaned forward. Then she spoke, low and deliberate, every syllable landing like a gavel. Mr. Miller, she started, calm but unbreakable, you have now interrupted me 6 times. 6 times you have shown this committee, the American people, and everyone watching exactly who you are. His mouth started to open, she lifted one finger, and something in her eyes made him stop cold. You see, men like you have been interrupting women like me our whole lives. You interrupt because you believe your voice matters more. You interrupt because you think yelling equals authority. You interrupt because, deep down, you know that if you actually had to answer my questions, if you had to face the evidence of the harm you caused thousands of children, your entire house of cards would collapse. Since you've made it nearly impossible for me to question you, allow me to simply read what these documents actually say. She began placing papers on the desk, one at a time. This memo from your own HHS deputy, infants as young as 8 months separated from their mothers. This Customs and Border Protection report, no system whatsoever to ever reunite those families. And this email chain, with your name on it, dismissing psychological warnings because, and I quote, the deterrent effect outweighs other considerations. Other considerations, Mr. Miller. Those other considerations were children. Babies. Toddlers who will carry this trauma forever. And you knew it. You all knew it. And you did it anyway. The gallery erupted, tears, gasps, scattered applause. Chairman Jordan pounded the gavel, but Crockett kept going. You can talk over me, you can try to diminish me, but I'm still here. Those children are still suffering. Those families are still shattered. And you are still responsible. You may have had the power to separate families, Mr. Miller, but you will never separate yourself from the consequences of what you did. Interrupting me 6 times won't change the fact that history has already judged you and found you lacking. Your legacy is not strength, Mr. Miller. Your legacy is the sound of children crying for parents they were stolen from. And no amount of shouting will ever silence that. Miller turned ashen. His mouth opened, closed, no words came. His lawyers sat frozen. For perhaps the first time anyone could recall, Stephen Miller was speechless. The room exploded again. People jumped to their feet applauding. Reporters typed furiously. C-SPAN's camera zoomed in on Miller's stunned face. Chairman Jordan hammered for order, his voice swallowed by the noise. Several Democrats stood clapping, even a few Republicans looked rattled. Crockett sat perfectly still, hands folded, face serene. She had used less than 3 of her 5 minutes. When some quiet finally returned, Jordan asked softly, Mr. Miller, would you like to respond? Miller leaned forward, his voice came out rough and shaky. I stand by the policies of the Trump administration. We were protecting America. The words fell flat. Everyone heard the emptiness. Crockett's final line was quiet but final, Mr. Chairman, I yield back the balance of my time. Mr. Miller's silence speaks louder than anything he could say. She yielded, and something remarkable happened. One by one, people in the gallery rose in a slow, deliberate standing ovation. Democratic members joined them. Even some Republicans looked away awkwardly. Member after member surrendered their remaining time, an unheard of move, knowing nothing else would match what they'd just witnessed. By the time Jordan called recess, Miller still sat frozen, papers scattered, staring at the table like a boxer who doesn't realize the fight is already over. In under 3 minutes, Jasmine Crockett had done what years of protests, investigations, and reporting never managed. She stripped away Miller's righteous armor and exposed the cruelty beneath. Within minutes the clip was everywhere. Crockett destroys Miller trended worldwide. Her line about the sound of children crying became iconic, memes, protest signs, T-shirts. Inside the hearing room, there was only silence as Jasmine Crockett gathered her folders, stood tall, and walked out, while the architect of family separation sat beaten, unable to look anyone in the eye. The fallout was instant and massive. The video topped 10 million views in an hour. Networks replayed the full exchange. Commentators from every side called it one of the most extraordinary moments they'd ever seen. Even conservative hosts struggled to defend it. Tucker Carlson said Miller walked into a trap. Laura Ingraham tried shifting to current border stats, but guests kept coming back to the viral takedown. Former President Obama praised Crockett's composure under fire. President Biden released a statement on the enduring scars of the policy and the need to ensure such cruelty never happens again. Trump called it an ambush on Truth Social, but the usual fire wasn't there. Notably, many of Miller's regular defenders stayed silent or changed the topic. Crockett's office was flooded with messages of support, her follower count surged by 500,000 in a single day. She declined most interviews, appearing only once, on PBS, to discuss policy, not drama. Miller's team issued a defensive statement that went nowhere. He canceled a Hannity spot and disappeared from view. Behind closed doors, Republican members complained that Miller had embarrassed them all by refusing to let a colleague finish a question. Immigration advocates turned Crockett's words into rallying cries. Families who endured the policy started speaking out again, many saying for the first time they finally felt heard. Legal experts pointed out that the documents she entered into the record, many previously overlooked, bolstered ongoing lawsuits. Constitutional scholars called it brilliant lawyering on a public stage. The cultural ripple kept growing. #LethearSpeak trended as women shared their own stories of being talked over. Diversity training started showing the clip. Pulling a Crockett became shorthand for calmly turning an aggressor's tactics against them. Within weeks, Miller's speaking gigs vanished, candidates distanced themselves, and family separation, once fading from memory, was thrust back into the center of national conversation. The Biden administration sped up family reunifications. Crockett introduced the Family Protection Act banning separation except in proven cases of abuse. It picked up surprising bipartisan support. Years later, the moment is still taught, in law schools, poli-sci classes, leadership seminars, as a masterclass in preparation, poise, and moral authority defeating raw aggression. Miller's influence never came back. The photo of him speechless became the defining image of his career. Crockett went on to pass landmark reform bills, mentor young women of color entering public service, and write a best-selling book called Uninterrupted. She never chased fame, she just kept working. And for the families who lived through the nightmare of separation, many say the day a freshman congresswoman finally forced the architect to face what he'd done was the first time they felt anything close to justice. That one exchange, 6 interruptions transformed into undeniable proof of character, didn't just go viral. It changed how we talk about power, respect, accountability, and what real strength actually looks like. So the next time you're facing someone who thinks volume equals victory, remember Jasmine Crockett that afternoon. Stay calm, bring the receipts, let their behavior do the talking, then hit them with the truth. Because in the end, no amount of yelling can ever drown out the sound of children crying, or the force of moral clarity when it finally arrives. If this breakdown moved you or gave you something to think about, please subscribe, tap the bell, and share it with someone who needs to see it. Let us know in the comments what other moments you want us to cover next. In the fight for truth and justice, every voice counts. The only question is whether we'll use ours as powerfully as Jasmine Crockett used hers that day. Thank you for watching. Stay informed, stay engaged, and never let anyone interrupt your truth.